Section 11 of L'Assommoir. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. L'Assommoir by Emile Zola, translated by Ernest A. Vizitelli. Third part of Chapter 3. The severe barrenness of the staircase made them very grave. An attendant, superbly attired in a red waistcoat and a coat trimmed with gold lace, who seemed to be awaiting them on the landing, increased their emotion. It was with great respect and treading as softly as possible that they entered the French gallery. Then, without stopping, their eyes occupied with the gilding of the frames, they followed the string of little rooms, glancing at the passing pictures, too numerous to be seen properly. It would have required an hour before each if they had wanted to understand it. What a number of pictures! There was no end to them. They must be worth a mint of money. Right at the end, Monsieur Madinier suddenly ordered a halt opposite the raft of the Medusa, and he explained the subject to them. All deeply impressed and motionless, they uttered not a word. When they started off again, Boche expressed the general feeling, saying it was marvelous. In the Apollo gallery, the inlaid flooring especially astonished the party, a shining floor as clear as a mirror, and which reflected the legs of the seats. Mademoiselle Remanjou kept her eyes closed because she could not help thinking that she was walking on water. They called to Madame Gaudron to be careful how she trod on account of her condition. Monsieur Madinier wanted to show them the gilding and paintings of the ceiling, but it nearly broke their necks to look up above, and they could distinguish nothing. Then, before entering the square salon, he pointed to a window, saying, "That's the balcony from which Charles IX fired on the people." He looked back to make sure the party was following. In the middle of the salon carré, he held up his hand. "There are only masterpieces here," he said in a subdued voice, as though in church. They went all around the room. Gervaise wanted to know about the wedding at Cana. Coupeau paused to stare at the Mona Lisa, saying that she reminded him of one of his aunts. Boche and Bibi the Smoker snickered at the nudes, pointing them out to each other and winking. The Gaudron looked at the Virgin of Murillo, he with his mouth open, she with her hands folded on her belly. When they had been all around the salon, Monsieur Madinier wished them to go round it again. It was so worthwhile. He was very attentive to Madame Lorilleux because of her silk dress, and each time that she questioned him, he answered her gravely with great assurance. She was curious about Titian's mistress, because the yellow hair resembled her own. He told her it was La Belle Ferronnière, a mistress of Henry IV, about whom there had been a play at the Ambigu. Then the wedding party invaded the long gallery, occupied by the Italian and Flemish schools. More paintings, always paintings, saints, men and women, with faces which some of them could understand, landscapes that were all black, animals turned yellow, a medley of people and things, the great mixture of the colors, which was beginning to give them all violent headaches. Monsieur Madinier no longer talked as he slowly headed the procession, which followed him in good order, with stretched necks and upcast eyes. Centuries of art passed before their bewildered ignorance, the fine sharpness of the early masters, the splendors of the Venetians, the vigorous life, beautiful with light, of the Dutch painters. But what interested them most were the artists who were copying, with their easels planted amongst the people, painting away unrestrainedly. An old lady mounted on a pair of high steps, working a big brush over the delicate sky of an immense painting, struck them as something most peculiar. Slowly the word must have gone around that a wedding party was visiting the Louvre. Several painters came over with big smiles. Some visitors were so curious that they went to sit on benches ahead of the group in order to be comfortable while they watched them pass in review. Museum guards bit back comments. The wedding party was now quite weary and beginning to drag their feet. Monsieur Madinier was reserving himself to give more effect to a surprise that he had in store. He went straight to the Kermesse of Rubens, but he said nothing. He contented himself with directing the others' attention to the picture by a sprightly glance. The ladies uttered faint cries the moment they brought their noses close to the painting. Then, blushing deeply, they turned away their heads. The men, though, kept them there, cracking jokes and seeking for the coarser details. "Just look," exclaimed Boche. "It's worth the money. There's one spewing, and another he's watering the dandelions. And that one, oh, that one! Oh, well, they're a nice clean lot, they are." "Let us be off," said Monsieur Madinier, delighted with his success. "There is nothing more to see here." They retraced their steps, passing again through the Salon Carré and the Apollo Gallery. Madame Lerat and Mademoiselle Remanjou complained, declaring that their legs could scarcely bear them. But the cardboard box manufacturer wanted to show Lorilleux the old jewellery. It was close by in a little room which he could find with his eyes shut. However, he made a mistake and led the wedding party astray through 7 or 8 cold, deserted rooms, only ornamented with severe looking-glass cases, containing numberless broken pots and hideous little figures. While looking for an exit, they stumbled into the collection of drawings. It was immense. Through room after room they saw nothing interesting, just scribblings on paper that filled all the cases and covered the walls. They thought there was no end to these drawings. Monsieur Madinier, losing his head, not willing to admit that he did not know his way, ascended a flight of stairs, making the wedding party mount to the next floor. This time they traversed the Naval Museum, among models of instruments and cannons, plans in relief, and vessels as tiny as playthings. After going a long way and walking for a quarter of an hour, the party came upon another staircase, and having descended this, found itself once more surrounded by the drawings. Then despair took possession of them as they wandered at random through long halls following Monsieur Madinier, who was furious and mopping the sweat from his forehead. He accused the government of having moved the doors around. Museum guards and visitors looked on with astonishment as the procession, still in a column of couples, passed by. They passed again through the Salon Carré, the French Gallery, and then along the cases where minor Eastern divinities slumbered peacefully. It seemed they would never find their way out. They were getting tired and made a lot of noise. Closing time, called out the attendants in a loud tone of voice. And the wedding party was nearly locked in. An attendant was obliged to place himself at the head of it and conduct it to a door. Then, in the courtyard of the Louvre, when it had recovered its umbrellas from the cloakroom, it breathed again. Monsieur Madinier regained his assurance. He had made a mistake in not turning to the left. Now he recollected that the jewelry was to the left. The whole party pretended to be very pleased at having seen all they had. 4 o'clock was striking. There were still 2 hours to be employed before the dinner time, so it was decided that they should take a stroll, just to occupy the interval. The ladies, who were very tired, would have preferred to sit down, but as no one offered any refreshments, they started off, following the line of quays. There they encountered another shower, and so sharp a one that in spite of the umbrellas, the ladies' dresses began to get wet. Madame Lorilleux, her heart sinking within her each time a drop fell upon her black silk, proposed that they should shelter themselves under the Pont Royal. Besides, if the others did not accompany her, she threatened to go all by herself. And the procession marched under one of the arches of the bridge. They were very comfortable there. It was most decidedly a capital idea. The ladies, spreading their handkerchiefs over the paving stones, sat down with their knees wide apart and pulled out the blades of grass that grew between the stones with both hands, whilst they watched the dark flowing water as though they were in the country. The men amused themselves calling out very loud, so as to awaken the echoes of the arch. Boche and Bibi the smoker shouted insults into the air at the top of their voices, one after the other. They laughed uproariously when the echo threw the insults back at them. When their throats were hoarse from shouting, they made a game of skipping flat stones on the surface of the Seine. The shower had ceased, but the whole party felt so comfortable that no one thought of moving away. The Seine was flowing by, an oily sheet carrying bottle corks, vegetable peelings, and other refuse that sometimes collected in temporary whirlpools moving along with the turbulent water. Endless traffic rumbled on the bridge overhead, the noisy bustle of Paris, of which they could glimpse only the rooftops to the left and right, as though they were in the bottom of a deep pit. Mademoiselle Remanjou sighed. If the leaves had been out, this would have reminded her of a bend of the Marne where she used to go with a young man. It still made her cry to think of him. At last, Monsieur Madinier gave the signal for departure. They passed through the Tuileries gardens in the midst of a little community of children, whose hoops and balls upset the good order of the couples. Then, as the wedding party, on arriving at the Place Vendôme, looked up at the column, Monsieur Madinier gallantly offered to treat the ladies to a view from the top. His suggestion was considered extremely amusing. Yes, they would go up. It would give them something to laugh about for a long time. Besides, it would be full of interest for those persons who had never been higher than a cow pasture. Do you think Clump Clump will venture inside there with her leg all out of place? Murmured Madame Lorilleux. I'll go up with pleasure, said Madame Lerat, but I won't have any men walking behind me. And the whole party ascended. In the narrow space afforded by the spiral staircase, the 12 persons crawled up one after the other, stumbling against the worn steps and clinging to the walls. Then, when the obscurity became complete, they almost split their sides with laughing. The ladies screamed when the gentlemen pinched their legs. But they weren't stupid enough to say anything. The proper plan is to think that it is the mice nibbling at them. It wasn't very serious. The men knew when to stop. Boche thought of a joke and everyone took it up. They called down to Madame Gaudron to ask her if she could squeeze her belly through. Just think, if she should get stuck there, she would completely block the passage, and how would they ever get out? They laughed so at the jokes about her belly that the column itself vibrated. Boche was now quite carried away, and declared that they were growing old climbing up this chimney pipe. Was it ever coming to an end, or did it go right up to heaven? He tried to frighten the ladies by telling them the structure was shaking. Coupeau, meanwhile, said nothing. He was behind Gervaise with his arm around her waist, and felt that she was everything perfect to him. When they suddenly emerged again into the daylight, he was just in the act of kissing her on the cheek. Well, you're a nice couple. You don't stand on ceremony, said Madame Lorilleux with a scandalized air. Bibi the smoker pretended to be furious. He muttered between his teeth, "You made such a noise together, I wasn't even able to count the steps." But Monsieur Madinier was already up on the platform, pointing out the different monuments. Neither Madame Fauconnier nor Mademoiselle Remanjou would on any consideration leave the staircase. The thought of the pavement below made their blood curdle, and they contented themselves with glancing out of the little door. Madame Lerat, who was bolder, went round the narrow terrace, keeping close to the bronze dome. But, mon Dieu, it gave one a rude emotion to think that one only had to slip off. The men were a little paler than usual as they stared down at the square below. You would think you were up in mid-air, detached from everything. No, it wasn't fun. It froze your very insides. Monsieur Madinier told them to raise their eyes and look straight into the distance to avoid feeling dizzy. He went on pointing out the Invalides, the Panthéon, Notre Dame, and the Montmartre hill. Madame Lorilleux asked if they could see the place where they were to have dinner, the Silver Windmill on the Boulevard La Chapelle. For 10 minutes they tried to see it, even arguing about it. Everyone had their own idea where it was. It wasn't worthwhile coming up here to bite each other's noses off, said Boche angrily as he turned to descend the staircase. The wedding party went down, unspeaking and sulky, awakening no other sound beyond that of shoes clanking on the stone steps. When it reached the bottom, Monsieur Madinier wished to pay, but Coupeau would not permit him, and hastened to place 24 sous into the keeper's hand, 2 sous for each person. So they returned by the boulevard and the Faubourg du Poissonnier. Coupeau, however, considered that their outing could not end like that. He bundled them all into a wine shop, where they took some vermouth. End of third part of chapter 3. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.